Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. We always tackle the really fascinating and sometimes uh, pretty strange topics.
That's right.
And, well, today is no different.
Absolutely.
Buckle up, because we are talking about DNA,
Okay.
but not just like the basics of DNA that you learned in high school biology class. We're talking about what if DNA is actually more than just a blueprint for our bodies?
Yeah.
What if it's like a cage for our souls?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a pretty wild idea, right? And,
Yeah.
when you really start to dig into the research, like the stuff that Michael Talbot talks about in the holographic universe, or even Zecharia Sitchin and his research on those ancient Sumerian texts, and even what Montauk has to say about these
Oh, yeah. Montauk?
robotoids. Yeah. It's like you start to see all these weird connections.
So, okay, let's start with the holographic universe.
Okay.
I'm kind of familiar with the basic idea, but how does this even relate to our DNA being a trap for our soul?
Right. So Talbot, he basically lays out this really fascinating argument
Okay.
that reality, the way we experience it, with our senses and stuff, it might just be a projection. Imagine a giant cosmic movie projector,
Okay.
casting this illusion of a solid world all around us.
Okay.
And he's suggesting that there's actually a deeper level, a hidden order that's underlying everything.
So are you saying that we're all living in the Matrix?
Well, it's not exactly like the Matrix, but it's kind of similar in that.
Okay.
Our perception of reality might be way more malleable than we think.
I mean, it's a trippy idea, but how did Talbot even come up with this? Where's the evidence?
So it's interesting because Talbot wasn't the only one who was thinking about this.
Okay.
He actually drew upon the work of two other really brilliant guys.
Okay.
A physicist named David Bohm and a
Okay.
neurophysiologist, Carl Perbram.
Okay.
And get this, they both arrived at this holographic idea totally independently, from completely different fields of study.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Bohm, he was wrestling with all this weird interconnectedness
Cool.
that quantum physics was revealing,
Yeah.
how these particles can be in multiple places at once and how they're all linked together in this mysterious way.
Right.
And then Perbram, he was coming at it from the perspective of how does the brain work?
Right.
How we store memories.
Yeah.
And they both kind of came to this conclusion that maybe the universe and maybe even the brain works kind of like a hologram.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
But what kind of evidence did they have to back this up? What made them think that the universe is like a hologram?
Well, Perbram, he was really intrigued by the work of a neurosurgeon, Dr. Wilder Penfield.
Okay.
And Penfield, he was studying epilepsy.
Yep.
And what he would do is he would stimulate different parts of his patients' brains with a little electrode. And what was crazy was that when he did this, it triggered really vivid memories in his patients. And it seems like these memories were kind of stored holographically.
What do you mean by that? Spread out throughout the whole brain?
Exactly.
Oh.
Instead of being localized in a specific spot.
So it's not like our memories are files stored in a folder in our brain.
No, not really. It's more
Okay.
imagine a scent that fills up a whole room,
Okay. Yeah.
It's everywhere. You can't pinpoint exactly where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And Talbot, he brings up these experiments by a guy named Georg von Bakesy.
Okay.
And what Bakesy did was he showed that people could actually experience sensations like touch or sound
Okay.
in parts of their body where they didn't have any sense receptors.
Bro.
So imagine feeling a touch on your hand, even though your hand's been amputated.
That is so strange.
It's wild, right? And these experiments, they kind of suggest that maybe our brains are actually constructing our perception of reality.
Okay.
Filling in the blanks,
Mhm.
based on this deeper, interconnected, holographic blueprint.
Okay, I think I'm following you so far. So if our brains are kind of projecting our reality
Yeah.
based on this holographic blueprint, where does DNA fit into all of this?
Right. So that's where it gets even more interesting,
Right.
because if we entertain this idea that reality is way more malleable than we think, it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Could our own DNA actually be acting as a limiting factor within this whole holographic system?
So are you saying that our genes could be preventing us from experiencing a fuller, more expansive reality?
It's definitely a possibility that's worth considering.
All right.
And that's where Zecharia Sitchin's work comes in.
Okay, Zecharia Sitchin, remind me what he was all about.
Right. So Sitchin, he did all this research on ancient Sumerian texts.
Right, the Anunnaki and all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. The Anunnaki, those ancient Mesopotamian deities,
Yeah.
who he believed were involved in the genetic engineering of early humans.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Mm.
But how does that connect to our DNA being like a trap?
Okay, so Sitchin's interpretation of those Sumerian texts,
Mm-hmm.
it suggests that the Anunnaki, they intentionally withheld certain genes from humans.
Okay.
Specifically, the gene for what he called immortality.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about like living forever?
Not necessarily forever, but
Right.
like a much longer lifespan
Okay.
than what we currently experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we were created with a built-in expiration date.
Okay, so our DNA could be limiting our lifespan, but like, how does that equal our souls being trapped?
So here's where we have to consider the possibility of something like soul stuff.
Soul stuff. Okay.
It's a subtle energy form
Okay.
that's connected to consciousness.
Okay.
Some people believe that it exists,
Okay.
and if this soul stuff does exist,
Mm-hmm.
could it be that our limited DNA,
Okay.
the DNA that we allegedly inherited from these genetic engineers,
Yeah.
is restricting its full potential?
Whoa. Okay, so you're saying that our genetic code could be holding our consciousness hostage, preventing us from like reaching a higher level of awareness, experiencing a longer lifespan, or even fully expressing our souls.
That's the implication.
Okay.
And it leads us to one of the more bizarre claims in Montauk,
Okay, let's hear it.
the existence of robotoids.
Robocoids.
Yeah.
Like robots.
Well, not exactly like robots as we typically imagine them.
Okay.
Montauk describes these robotoids as having biological computer brains
Okay.
that are actually based on holographic principles.
Whoa.
So they're kind of like this blend of organic and artificial intelligence.
So you're telling me there are these like
Yeah.
biological robots
Mhm.
walking around with holographic brains? That sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But
What does this have to do with the DNA trap?
so the really chilling part
Yeah.
is that according to Montauk, these beings, they lack full souls.
Okay.
They might have like some basic level of consciousness,
Okay.
but not the full range of emotions
Mhm.
and creativity
Right.
and spiritual depth that we associate with being human.
So they're like sophisticated machines. But walking around in like biological bodies? Man, that's a creepy thought. So that brings up the question, like, what even is soul stuff? If these robotoids don't have it, does that mean it can't be artificially created? Or is it something that's like inherent to our organic nature?
Right.
And maybe, like you were saying before, maybe it's limited by our DNA.
That is like the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really
Yeah.
makes you think about the nature of consciousness,
Yes.
what it means to be human,
Yeah.
and it exposes the limits of what we currently understand about all of this.
Okay, need like a minute to process all this.
Take your time.
This is a lot. We're talking holographic universes, genetically engineered humans, soul stuff, and now like biological robots with holographic brains.
I know it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But we're just getting started. We
Okay.
haven't even touched on the Gnostic perspective yet.
Okay, hit me with it. I'm ready.
All right, let's dive into Gnosticism.
Okay, Gnosticism. I've heard the name, but honestly, I don't really know what it's all about. Fill me in, and how does it even connect to this idea of a DNA trap?
So Gnosticism is this really fascinating school of thought, and actually it offers a pretty compelling parallel to this whole DNA trap concept.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Okay, so imagine this. What if it's not just our genes that are holding us back?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's the actual nature of the material world itself? Like,
Yeah.
what if the whole material world is the trap?
Hold on, are we talking like a Matrix situation here?
You know, it's funny you should mention that.
Yeah.
The Matrix, that movie, actually borrows a lot of ideas from Gnosticism.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah. So in Gnostic philosophy, there's this concept of a flawed deity
Okay.
called the demiurge.
The demiurge.
Yeah. And the Gnostics, they believe that this demiurge created the material world as a kind of prison
At prison for what?
for our true spiritual essence. They called this essence the nous,
The noose?
which you can kind of think of as like our inner spark of divinity.
Okay, so it's not just our physical bodies that are limited. It's
Right.
like our whole perception of reality.
Right.
Our senses, our beliefs, even our thoughts could all be part of this cosmic trap.
Exactly. The Gnostics, they believed that this demiurge, he wants to keep us blind to our true nature,
Okay.
to our connection to the source. They call this source the pleroma.
The pleroma.
Yeah, it's like a realm of pure consciousness and unity.
Okay, so if we're all basically prisoners in this material world, this illusion created by the demiurge, how do we break free? Is there like a secret code or something?
Right. That's where this idea of gnosis comes in.
Gnosis.
Yeah, and it's not just knowledge in the intellectual sense. It's a kind of direct experiential knowing and awakening to our true nature.
So it's about like seeing through the illusion, recognizing the trap for what it is.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that even Montauk, with all this talk about robotoids and orgone energy, it kind of echoes this Gnostic idea of awakening. Remember how we were talking about lucid dreaming earlier?
Yeah.
Well, Montauk presents this as a metaphor for becoming aware of the reality program that we're all plugged into.
Okay.
You know, it's like instead of just being swept along by the current of our thoughts and emotions, we can learn to step back and actually observe them.
Right.
To become aware of the underlying program that's running.
So it's like hitting the pause button on autopilot and taking a look at the code.
Yeah, exactly. And that awareness, that ability to just like step back and observe, that's the first step towards breaking free from those limiting patterns, like waking up from a dream. Or in this case, waking up from the illusion of a fixed, solid reality.
Okay. So once we're awake,
Yeah.
what then? Do we start like bending spoons with our minds or something?
Well, maybe not bending spoons right away. But who knows? Maybe we can start to influence our reality in more subtle ways. Talbot talks about how our consciousness might be influencing that cosmic motion picture projector all the time, you know, shaping the events and experiences we encounter.
Okay. So you're saying that our thoughts, our beliefs, our intentions, they could be having a much bigger impact on our reality than we realize.
Yeah, I think it's worth considering.
Okay.
And this is also where the Gnostic emphasis on gnosis comes in.
Right.
It's about cultivating that direct experiential knowledge, that intuitive understanding of how reality really works on a deeper level.
And maybe, just maybe, that deeper understanding can help us to unlock our full potential.
Right.
To break free from the limitations of our physical and genetic programming.
Yeah.
And to kind of reshape reality in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
It's a journey, not a destination.
That's a good way to put it.
And the best part is that we're all on this journey together.
It is kind of exciting when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
But man, this is a lot to process.
I know it's a lot.
I think our listeners might need a minute to digest all this too.
Agreed. We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, and I think everything we've talked about so far, it really sets the stage for a powerful final thought.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's take a quick break so everyone can catch their breath. We'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive into the DNA trap. Stay with us. Okay, so we're back, and man, my mind is still like reeling from all this. Holographic universes, Russian robotoids, Gnostic philosophy. It's like we went down like the rabbit hole of weirdness.
It is pretty wild stuff, right?
Yeah, but you know, when you look at it all through this lens of the DNA trap idea, it kind of starts to make sense in this like unsettling but also kind of empowering way.
Right. It all comes back to this question of, are we being held back? You know, are we truly living up to our full potential as human beings?
Yeah, and if we're not, how do we break free? Like, what are the keys to unlocking this cage?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because it's not just about escaping some physical trap. It's about expanding our consciousness. It's about questioning like everything we think we know about reality. And maybe it's about tapping into that deeper level of interconnectedness that Talbot talks about in the holographic universe.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? Do we need to like meditate for hours a day, or chant ancient mantras, or build a cloud buster in our backyard?
You know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Remember, Talbot and Montauk, they both emphasize the importance of self-awareness. It's about becoming more aware of our thoughts, our emotions, and the patterns that are shaping our perception of reality.
So it starts with paying attention, like becoming more mindful of the program that's running in our own minds.
Exactly. It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot. Taking a step back and really looking at the code. That awareness, that ability to just observe, that's where it all begins. It's like waking up from a dream.
Okay, but once we're awake, then what? Like, where does this awareness lead us?
Well, maybe not to bending spoons with our minds. At least not right away. But who knows, right? But maybe we can start to influence our reality in more subtle ways. Talbot talks about how our consciousness might be influencing that cosmic motion picture projector all the time. You know, shaping the events, the experiences that we encounter in our lives.
So our thoughts, our beliefs, our intentions, they could actually be having a much bigger impact on our reality than we realize.
I think it's definitely a possibility. And that's where the Gnostic emphasis on gnosis comes in. It's about cultivating that direct experiential knowledge, that intuitive understanding of how reality works on a deeper level.
And maybe, just maybe, that deeper understanding is what unlocks the door.
Right.
Allows us to break free from those limitations. And maybe even reshape reality in ways that we can't even begin to imagine right now.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Well, on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into the DNA trap. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. If our DNA is a trap, if the material world is an illusion, and if our consciousness has the power to reshape reality, then what does that say about free will? Are we truly the masters of our own destinies, or are we just playing out roles in some grand cosmic drama? It's a question worth exploring, and maybe the answers lie not in ancient texts or scientific theories, but within the depths of our own being. So keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep diving deep. You never know what treasures you might discover along the way.